The sun dipped below the horizon like a dying ember, casting eerie shadows over the small town of Greenwood Hollow. It was a cozy place, known for its friendly faces and sleepy streets. But lately, whispers of dread punctuated the locals' morning coffees. Every dawn, without fail, someone vanished. No chaos, no struggle, just gone, as if they'd never existed. As the amber twilight clung to the evening air, Jenna Harris, an ambitious journalist, arrived at the scene, her mind swirling with skepticism. Having spent years covering trivial stories for the local paper, she relished the idea that this could be her big break. People disappearing? It sounds like a mystery novel, she murmured to herself, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She parked her car in front of the Sinclair household, where Amelia Sinclair had vanished just days ago. It was a classic two-story with a white picket fence, the kind of house where no one would suspect foul play. Jenna approached the front door, the wooden frame warm against her palm. With a deep breath, she knocked. The door creaked open, revealing Mr. Sinclair, a man whose eyes were sunken yet vigilant. He seemed to be perpetually on edge, shabby clothes clinging to his gaunt frame. "What do you want?" His voice was like gravel, rough and unwelcoming. "I'm Jenna Harris, a journalist. I'm investigating the recent disappearances," she replied, trying to project confidence. People could smell fear like a shark senses blood. "Go away. We don't need your stories," he spat. But there was something laced in his words that made Jenna's gut twist, a warning, perhaps, or maybe a plea. "You should talk about this," Jenna continued, pressing her luck. "Amelia's disappearance, it's not just a story, it's real." She pointed out how the townsfolk were starting to worry, how they were losing faith in their safety. His eyes darted past her, almost expecting someone to emerge from the shadows, a non-existent Amelia, perhaps. With a heavy sigh, Mr. Sinclair reluctantly let her in, the door creaking like an old ghost. Inside, the air was thick with dust, as if time itself had forgotten this place. The living room was filled with pictures of vacations, birthdays, and family gatherings, remnants of a life now obscured by emptiness. Jenna switched on her recorder, capturing his barely coherent mumbles, but soon realized it was more important to listen to his story. Amelia noticed things, he eventually admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. She noticed the flowers wilted before they should, the kids on the block acting strange after sundown, I think. I think it came for her because she saw. The hairs on Jenna's arms stood erect. "What do you mean by it?" His gaze fell to the floor. "I can't explain it." "Nobody who notices ever comes back." His pitiful eyes glinted with hopelessness. "Do you think it's a person? A group?" It was standard reporter practice to dig deeper, but with each question she felt an invisible weight settling on her like a wet cloak. Mr. Sinclair shook his head. "People don't disappear like that, Jenna. They're collected." His voice quivered with a mix of fear and resolve. "At night, something watches, and it listens." Intrigued, Jenna continued probing. "What have you heard? Any sounds, anything unusual?" "The clock. It ticks in a different way." "Can you hear it?" "Only at midnight. Just before the clock strikes, the shadows deepen, and the whole town it feels different, cold. Like a predator is lurking." Jenna's heart raced. She noted the time as the orange glow of sunset faded, giving way to a deepening dusk. Gathering her resolve, she promised Mr. Sinclair she would look into Amelia's disappearance further, though in truth, every instinct screamed at her to leave. After she left, the streets felt unusually quiet. The kind of quiet where every creak of pavement echoed and the rustling of leaves sounded like whispers. Jenna's mind was awash with possibilities, but also with dread. Perhaps it was just a small-town myth spun out of paranoia and grief. That evening, Jenna decided to stay overnight in her car parked nearby, hoping to catch sight of whatever was collecting the lost souls of Greenwood Hollow. She didn't want to believe, but needed to witness the truth. The stars blinked into existence, oblivious to the dread creeping up her spine. Midnight approached slowly, yet uneasily. With every tick of the clock behind her, she found herself expecting something horrific to emerge. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a rhythmic ticking that wasn't her watch. Jenna's instincts kicked in and she turned to find the source. What she saw rendered her paralyzed in both fascination and terror. In the flicker of her headlights, there was a figure, a silhouette stood where the shadow of the Sinclair home loomed darker than it should. Jenna squinted, the oddity of its stillness not quite registering. It was tall, impossibly skinny, with limbs distorted at angles that felt wrong. The creature seemed to wear a cloak of shadows, blending with the darkness. Jenna held her breath, instinctively reaching for her recorder, but in that very moment it fizzled into silent chaos. She had no choice but to confront the nightmare without proof. She turned back to the figure, which now glided closer, the air around it turning frigid. As the creature came into focus, its face twisted into a grotesque mask reminiscent of a child's, but with deep-set eyes staring straight into her soul. It made no sound, yet its presence suffocated her. Visions of the townspeople, those lost before, danced in her mind like echoes. Amelia noticed now she's gone. The realization boiled within Jenna. This entity was not simply collecting the townsfolk, it was a harbinger of oblivion, feeding on awareness, drawing its victims into utter silence. They didn't just vanish, they were absorbed, their essence erased. The watcher stepped forward, and Jenna stumbled backward. It extended a long, spindly finger. Its voice resounded like a swarm of bees. You notice, and yet intend to leave. You are different. Panic surged through her. She turned to flee, but in a heartbeat, the creature closed the distance. Its elongated form licked at the edges of her sight, whispering sweet nothingness into her ears. If every shred of her instinct screamed at her to look away, to drop the facade of curiosity she'd clung to all night. Yet in the depths of her terror, Jenna had a thought, a fleeting moment of clarity. If awareness is the key, then perhaps understanding is the answer. Gathering every fiber of courage, Jenna began to reason aloud. You take them because they see, but perhaps seeing can save someone too. The creature halted, tilting its head as if considering her. Change, it hissed, resonance arching through the stillness around them. We all change. What is your change? I'll gather the others. I'll find a way to bring them back. Jenna shouted, devoid of rational thought. Boldness festered as the cold air filled her lungs. Analyzing her next move, she felt the overwhelming sense of dread dissipate slightly with a drumming heartbeat. Come morning, I will undo this, she stated, the intensity igniting a flicker of hope. The creature stared, its shadow writhing against the ground. Finally, it stepped back, disappearing into the night, leaving Jenna seething with adrenaline. In the days that followed, she raced against the clock, hatching her plan. Mobilizing the townsfolk, she informed them of their shared fate. Those who had lost their neighbors began echoing tales of unease. They banded together just as the clock struck midnight, facing the entity together, even as fear gnawed at their resolve. Each townsperson reclaimed their story, relaying their encounters, weaving networks of shared experiences, until they stood as a formidable force at the threshold of the unknown, ready to challenge the darkness that threatened to erase them all. And with every breath, as midnight approached once again, the whispers of the lost filled the loft night, resonating like a jolt of electricity. Remember, Jenna rallied them. They can only collect us if we let them take our narratives. We reclaim our reality. And thus, as the cold night air seeped into their bones, they forged a bond stronger than fear, dismantling the very concept of erasure. For a small town that had suffocated under the weight of its secrets now learned that to live, they must always remember who they were. As they faced the unknown, Jenna knew one thing for certain: they might be watched, but they would not be collected again. 15 key moments for visuals. 1. Jenna's skeptical arrival in Greenwood Hollow. 2. Mr. Sinclair's haunted expression while standing at the door. 3. The cluttered living room filled with family photos. 4. Jenna's recorder capturing Mr. Sinclair's words. 5. The atmosphere growing tense as Mr. Sinclair discusses the disappearances. 6. Golden sunset casting long shadows over the town. 7. Jenna parked in front of the Sinclair home at twilight. 8. The silhouette of the creature emerging from the darkness. 9. A close-up of Jenna's terrified face as she first sees the creature. 10. The grotesque features of the entity illuminated by car lights. 11. The icy breath exhaled from Jenna during her confrontation. 12. The townsfolk rallying together, their expressions filled with resolve. 13. A visual representation of memories swirling, highlighting the lost residents. 14. The moment when the creature retreats, shadows enfolding it. 15. Jenna leading the charge, surrounded by empowered townspeople,